Yeah? Okay. In the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, in the first 3 chapters of Canto 1 Srimad Bhagavatam, the foundation of the whole Srimad Bhagavatam is presented. It's presented in the form of 6 questions asked by sages that were assembled at Naimisharanya. Why were they assembled at Naimisharanya? Because they knew that Krishna had departed, and Krishna departing means Kali Yuga is going to begin. And they know what that meant. Bad news. All good quality, good character, everything goes down, 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 down. So they wanted to do something that would counteract that, neutralize that negative effect of diminishing good qualities of mankind in the age of Kali. So they decided to go to Naimisharanya, which is a celebrated holy place, perform a sacrifice that would, one after the next, go on for 1,000 years. As soon as one yajna is over, the next yajna begins, and that was their plan. Purpose? Diminish the deteriorating effects of the age of Kali. So they assembled there, and they were about to begin their first yajna, when Sutta Goswami was in their midst. And they decided, Sutta Goswami, he's such an exalted person. He's the son of Romaharshan Sutta, who was one of Vyasadev's disciples, who was entrusted to narrate and preserve all of the Puranic portion of the Vedic literature. And Sutta had learned from his father. And Sutta had recently heard Srimad Bhagavatam being spoken by Shukadev Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit. You know who is Maharaj Parikshit? Yeah? Okay, who is Maharaj Parikshit? No, Maharaj Parikshit. Maharaj Parikshit had a father, and his father had a father. His grandfather was the Pandavas, or specifically Arjuna. Arjuna had a son. He had more than one son, but one of his son's name was Abhimanyu. There we go. And Abhimanyu was killed during the Kurukshetra battle, but there was a son of Abhimanyu who was within the womb of his mother when Abhimanyu was killed. So who was the mother of, or who was the wife of Abhimanyu? Starts with a U. Uttara. Uttara was pregnant with Abhimanyu's son when Abhimanyu was killed on the battlefield. So Maharaj Parikshit was still within her womb, and a really bad person, and his name was Ashwatthama, tried to kill the child while still in the womb of the mother. Krishna protected him, so he survived. And that child within her womb was Maharaj Parikshit. So Maharaj Parikshit, when he grew up, he became king. And he was very virtuous, very powerful, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Great devotee, great king, great personality. But something unfortunate happened. What happened? What was the unfortunate thing that happened? Put a snake around the neck of a sage that was in meditation. That's bad. Really bad. So he did like that because Krishna wanted that he would be cursed so that he could then give up his kingdom at a young age and he could hear Srimad Bhagavatam. And who did he hear Srimad Bhagavatam from? Starts with an S. Sukadev, right. Sukadev. Almost. Sukadev. Sukadev. So Sukadev Goswami spoke Srimad Bhagavatam to Maharaj Parikshit, and in the audience was Sutta. So now we're back in Canto 1, Chapter 1. The sages of Naimisharanya saw, look, there's Sutta. Maybe he can speak Srimad Bhagavatam, because he heard the whole Srimad Bhagavatam from Shukadev. So when they sat with Sutta Goswami, so over here is the sages, over here is Sutta, they asked him 6 questions in Chapter 1. Many things, but the main structure is they ask 6 questions. The last of the 6 questions was very simple. Now that Krishna has departed, when Krishna was present, all religious principles were being nicely protected by Krishna, just by his presence. But Krishna's gone. So where will religious principles take shelter now that Krishna is gone? And the answer was given in Srimad Bhagavatam. Shortly after Krishna's departure, Srimad Bhagavatam has appeared. And as the presence of Krishna gave light to the universe, Bhagavatam will also give light to people in this dark age of Kali, and thus the title Light of the Bhagavad. Got it? Okay, Light of the Bhagavad. That's where the title of the book was drawn from. It's from Canto 1, Chapter 3, verse 28, Srimad Bhagavatam. In 1961, Srila Prabhupada had not yet taken sannyas. He was living as a vanaprastha, or he had retired from family duties, and he was now preparing himself for the mission of his spiritual master that had been given to him to go to the Western countries, English-speaking parts of the world, and present the message of Lord Chaitanya. So he was preparing himself for that mission. While he was preparing himself for that mission, Prabhupada received an invitation from Japan. There's details, but an organizer of an event sent an invitation letter to Prabhupada, sufficient to get Prabhupada a passport and visa to go to Japan for a conference on preservation or upliftment of the human spirit, something like that. So Prabhupada prepared this Light of the Bhagavad for that visit, for that event. And with it was a 20,000 page manuscript, a description of paintings that he wanted the event organizer to arrange and pay for the printing of the book. And then Prabhupada would have displays made depicting the paintings and explaining how the paintings are fitting the theme of the conference, and also giving the Vedic conception, or the Srimad Bhagavatam's conception, of elevation of the human spirit. So that's a little of the background. We spent some time yesterday evening going over the description of the rainy season, because chapter 20 of Canto 10 is a description of the rainy season following the hot, hot, hot and dry summer season, and Krishna's activities during that rainy season and so forth. And then following the rainy season in India comes the autumn season. Just like now, this is the beginning of the autumn season, because Kartik is just finished, and that's the end of the rainy season. The way that Prabhupada composed this text from that chapter 20 of Canto 10, he selected some verses. He restated those verses to suit his audience and the purpose of the book, to teach lessons about life through scenes of nature. Prabhupada's understanding was very wise. People in the Far East have a tendency, there's a cultural tendency, to understand lessons of life through nature. So we're on verses 6 through 10, 5 verses. It's not exactly chronologically following chapter 20, but it's paraphrasing some of them to suit the audience and the purpose of the book. So here's the title of chapter 6. Just a short paragraph, followed by commentary that's a few paragraphs long, and that's the content of the book. So, Compassionately Preaching the Science of God is the title of this chapter 6. On hearing the sound, this is the rainy season. On hearing the sound of the torrential rains, the frogs come out of the mountain caves and begin to chant, like brahmacharis who chant the Vedic hymns by the order of the spiritual master. This painting was one of 48 paintings commissioned by Tamal Krishna Maharaj of a celebrated Chinese lady painter who was a well-known personality during her time, elderly, but she was a participant in this first publication in Hong Kong. So there's a frog sitting at the edge of a cave, beginning to chant. It wasn't chanting Vedic mantras, but it's a comparison. Prabhupada is taking this to encourage saintly people, scholarly people, learned people, high-thinking people to come out of their dwellings, come out into the public, work closely with others of similar nature and background, and speak this important message. So mindful of the theme of the event in Japan, Congress for the Cultivation of Human Spirit, sages of the world who believe in the Supreme must come out of their secluded places and distribute their wisdom to the people in general. So he was appealing to the audience. You're learned people, you're thoughtful people, you care about the welfare of the world. Come out of your secluded places and work cooperatively with others, spreading this message. Now, that the particular point in time in history, 1961, I mentioned this before, it's after the end of World War II. During World War II, there was massive dissension between multiple nations against other nations. It was wild. And following World War II, nations were very cautious. They weren't allowing foreign people to come in their country. They weren't giving visas. It was like protection. And this is just the beginning of an era that's becoming more open, and at least leading people and intellectuals and wise people encouraging, let's work together, build the United Nations, and stop the war type of activities, and work in a more cooperative manner, man to man, nation to nation, etc. It's kind of like a natural historical pendulum swing away from what was going on to building a new type of life. So Prabhupada is here encouraging those wise people who he thought would be his audience to come forward, work together. Another nice painting of the same. Leave behind your contemplative dwelling and go into the world and give this important message. Exactly what Srila Prabhupada did. Sages preach the spiritual science even amid the materialistic civilization. This is a photograph of Srila Prabhupada sitting in the garden right next to the LA Temple. Those of you who have been to the LA Temple, there's the temple room. Over here is Prabhupada's quarters on the right side. Go up a flight of stairs. And over there is Govinda's restaurant. And beyond Govinda's restaurant, there's a little place that was a garden. And Prabhupada would sit in the garden and meet with different persons. Here, in this case, it's some professors who had a high regard for Prabhupada. So they're professors, but they would listen to their teacher. And he would look at Prabhupada's intense expression, and they're listening peacefully, critically, but carefully to hear Prabhupada's message. And his message was the same message found within this very old book. Of course, the language and the manner of presentation was according to the audience. Perfect self-realized souls engaged in the service of the Lord are fearless, unafraid of Maya, just as law-abiding citizens of a state never fear retribution. They never fear retribution because they're not breaking the law. Meaning, protection is for those who abide by the law, and retribution is for those who break the law. So sages are persons who favor following the laws of God. And to present that, sages are fearless. So he's making this metaphor that persons who are fearless should come out of their comfortable residential facilities and go out into the world and bring the message, which is exactly what Srila Prabhupada personally did. He had a vision. It's outlined in the whole book, the 48 verse book, and he presented it strongly. And one of the first places he did was this Congress, or at least the intention, Congress for Cultivating the Human Spirit. Now, the manuscript that Prabhupada wrote wasn't published in 1961 because he didn't have the money, and he didn't go to the event because he didn't have the money. He was in his Vanaprastha stage and he didn't have savings. Everything was turned over to his family and he just lived by the mercy of Krishna. 23 years later, Srila Prabhupada, having assigned Tamal Krishna Maharaj to preach in China, the manuscript for Light of the Bhagavad and many other things were found in a trunk. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj arranged for the printing of this book in Chinese. It's the first printing. So that was 1984. 1984. And today in China, it's not any easier in China. I'm mentioning China because that's where the Light of Bhagavad was published. And also I made this presentation to make to the Chinese devotees. So here's the lady who is in charge of there's the GBC have wisely established a Chinese Society for Krishna Consciousness. It's not incorporated, it's just how it's known. We're ISKCON and they're SISKCON. And she's the appointed person by their own leaders to fearlessly, and I know history of where again and again and again and again, maybe 10 times, she's been seated with Chinese government officers in Beijing, and they're questioning this and that and the other thing. And she's fearless. She's not foolish, but she's not intimidated. Even when they show their teeth, and even when they growl and start barking, she's not intimidated. And her confidence and her savvy of how to deal with a tough situation has earned her respect, not only from the devotee community, but even from the government, without details, because this is being recorded. So fearlessness is required, even when there's obstacle, to continue to present the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. Devotees always speak boldly and scientifically about the means to reach the ultimate goal of life. This is a photograph of Srila Prabhupada on a morning walk with Professor Durkheim in Germany. Maybe you've heard his name because there's several sections. I believe there's one section even in Science of Self-Realization. There's many of room conversations and morning walk conversations with Professor Durkheim. He had a lot of respect for Prabhupada, and Prabhupada spoke clearly and directly and strongly, and he was able to fathom, at least to some degree, the message that Prabhupada was giving. However, if the leaders and intellectuals and wise people of a country don't come forward, it leads to a society that's unfortunate. Devotees feel compassion for the mass of people who have completely forgotten the Supreme and instead are engaged in the false pursuit of happiness that ends in the sense pleasures enjoyed by the hogs and dogs. Now, this is 1961, and remember, Prabhupada doesn't know the audience, and yet he's using the same phrases that he used throughout his life, the hogs and dogs. So he was bold. And because you use language like that and people can be put off. But he had the purity so that they could understand he was speaking with strong language to help shake the foundation of people's complacency and move to a point of spiritual action. So don't be neglectful. And if the thoughtful people are not going to help the rest of the people, then they'll be left with this civilization that's not very nice. The hogs and dogs civilization. Responsible leaders from all backgrounds must form a common platform, a league of devotees, to uplift the spiritual values of mankind. Now, historically, the League of Devotees was formed by Prabhupada with that very title. We mentioned this the first class. In Jhansi, there was an opportunity, apparently. Two ladies that owned some important piece of land in the city, they were willing to give it to Prabhupada for him to develop. And so he incorporated or established a document, the League of Devotees, and it was registered with the government. But that situation also didn't happen because the ladies were tricky. Somebody else wanted the land, so they told Prabhupada, yes, you can have the land, but you have to finish all the construction by such and such date, and if not, you'll lose everything. So he wasn't going to play games with people that were not being straightforward with him, so he didn't go forward. But the term League of Devotees is now entering into this document. And he from that time, 1960, when he formed the League of Devotees, in 61, he's writing this book. He is envisioning a worldwide organization of spiritually minded persons, leaders, who are working together to uplift the spiritual values of the whole world, at least within human society. It's not a new idea. The very same idea is described by Raghunath Das Goswami in his Manushiksha. The very first verse of Manushiksha, he speaks about persons who, from the Madhyama group, Madhyama means the intermediate group of spiritualists, should come together for the same purpose. To uplift the human spirit, or to uplift the spiritual values within society. And he was very clear. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his commentary adds, he meant people from different religious backgrounds set aside their differences of their rituals and their procedures of worship to work together to establish a more effective and very powerful means of lifting spiritual values within the world. A sample of this came earlier in history, where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu met with the governor of Madras, or now Chennai, whose name was Ramananda Roy. They met on the bank of the Kaveri River. That's in the background. And traveling with the governor were some brahmanas, pictured here, and some ministers, pictured behind the brahmanas. Over on the other side is the singular brahmachari who was traveling with Mahaprabhu. So when the two met by divine arrangement by the banks of the Kaveri River, they made an arrangement to meet later that evening in a quiet situation. And Lord Chaitanya began a discussion, asking Ramananda Roy, I heard you're very learned, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya has great respect for you. Could you share with me your understanding of the goal of life and how to reach it? That's where their discussion started. So several verses were given from scripture by Ramananda Roy, stating principles that lead to spiritual elevation. And they're correct principles because they're scriptural. But Lord Chaitanya said, that's nice, but go further, go further, go further. Finally, he accepted this verse that's from Brahma's Prayers, from Canto 10, Chapter 14. Celebrated verse, maybe we can say the verse together. Help save my voice. Jnane prayasam udapasya namanta eva jivanti sanmukharitam bhavadiya vartam stane statakshrati gatam tanuvan manobir ye prayaso jitachito pyasitais trilokyam. Celebrated verse. It means, even while remaining situated in their established social position, that's the third line, stane statak. So one doesn't have to give something up. You stay in your position. But jnane prayasa, the prayasa or the endeavor for cultivating of speculative knowledge, jnane prayasa, udapasya, means throw it away. Throw away the speculative way of approaching spiritual understanding. And namanta eva, take shelter of the holy name. And jivanti, sanmukhanitam, hearing the messages from persons who are pure. Hear the messages from those who are pure. Sanmukharitam bhavadiya vartan. And dedicate their lives to those messages. So this is describing the goal of life and the means to achieve it. The goal of life is to make that connection with Krishna restored. So the connection to restore the Krishna connection, stay in your position, leave aside the speculative tendencies to understand transcendence. Instead, take shelter, or jivanti, dedicate your life to the messages of transcendence, messages of Krishna, and heard from the right persons, and dedicate one's life to those narrations. One can do that from any social position. And tanu, van, and manaha, body, words, and mind, dedicated to those transcendental messages. And by that method, although Krishna is known as Ajita, Ajita means he can't be conquered, and he can be conquered. One can conquer Krishna. And conquering Krishna is not like, yay, I pinned him. But Krishna is conquered by the love of his devotees. So as love for the Supreme becomes awakened by this method, then the power of Krishna goes to that person, and their spiritual well-being is assured. So that's verse number 6. Moving on. So in this verse 6, he's encouraging sages to leave their comfortable residential quarters, go into the world, work cooperatively with others to present messages of spiritual life, cooperatively and effectively, and society can be uplifted that way. It fits right in with the theme of the conference. Then he drills down a little bit on that message, and one can move from sense gratification to self-realization. Again, the context is the rainy season in Vrindavan that comes after the scorching hot summer. So the verse 7 reads, the small rivulets that almost dried up during the months of May and June now begin to overflow their banks like upstarts that suddenly overflow the limits of expenditure. So sometimes there's scarcity and sometimes there's abundance. In the rainy season, with rain, it's a time of abundance. And so also the metaphorical abundance that comes with receiving downpours of mercy, then one may be charitable beyond one's normal capacity. So during the rainy season, there's bounty. Prabhupada decides to take this message, metaphorical message, and describe the extravagant. This is a painting by this lady, the artist lady who painted the paintings for the book. There's an extravagant person, and there's the agriculturalists out in their field. So the person that becomes extravagant may not have started like that, but once they become extravagant, they're enamored by the external features of phenomenal abundance and beauty. They have no insight into the whole manifestation. He's getting philosophical, using the metaphor of the rainy season to speak about people who also may come into a situation of abundance and they don't have a sense of the big picture, because that abundance is only temporary. And abundance can also lead to bad qualities, like exploiting those that don't have it, and arrogance, looking down upon those that don't have it, and competing with others who have it, and so forth. Not necessarily good character arises when abundance comes into one's life. Asleep to introspection, they are unable to derive any permanent value from the assets of the human form of body, what to speak of their personal assets. So that's the unfortunate circumstance when abundance or extravagance arises in the lives of those who are wealthy. In contrast, the introspective are as grave as the sea. Such grave persons use the full advantage of the human form of life. So you can see the theme is consistent. Pictures of nature and lessons of life that can be learned from pictures of nature. Those who are extravagant temporarily overflow in material enjoyment for some time. Nevertheless, as soon as the rainy seasons of life is over, they become as dry riverbeds. So affluence comes and goes. Sometimes it stays a little longer, Sometimes it stays a little shorter. And there are persons who don't use that affluence wisely, or they're not thinking even about something that's permanent. Sages understand how to use resources and how to train others when they receive resources, how to utilize them towards something that's permanent, even though the assets themselves may be temporary. So Prabhupada goes into it a little further. There's the introspective and there's the extravagant. And he's advocating the introspective life. And the extravagant we already saw. The same image was meant to show people who, through false ego, become thoughtless about the requirements of others and the well-being of others and those higher thoughts of life, immersed in a very strong false ego way of life. So he's encouraging, through the medium of the rainy season depiction, become introspective. The mind dedicated to extravagance is a bad bargain, but one can make the best use of the mind by introspection. So introspection meaning what's really valuable, his way of saying the big picture, what's really valuable in life. Is the temporary really valuable, or is the permanent really valuable? What's that which is permanent? And while we're living in the temporary life, cultivating inwardly the eternal, non-temporary value of life. Makes it another nature depiction. The sea is very grave. Although rivers are pouring water into the sea always remains the same. Volumes and volumes and volumes and volumes and volumes of water are poured into the sea, but the sea maintains its limits. So like that, persons who are introspective, looking within, whether there's the situation of abundance or a situation of scarcity, their equanimity remains the same because they're looking for something that's more permanent than having affluence or having scarcity. And when affluence does come, the contemplative person has a clear idea of what the proper use of that is. So the strength of the body should be used for self-realization, not for sense gratification. Again, another theme that Prabhupada would speak about over and over. The Bhagavatam speaks about it in many different ways. One of those examples in the Bhagavatam is, who's this person who's being depicted? Jad Bharat is carrying the palanquin of King Rahugana. You know the story of King Rahugana? 5th canto. King Rahugana was a king. Abhi, you know the story, King Rahugana? You don't think so? He was proud. And there weren't cars at that time. Kings were moved about from one place to another by being carried. Something like this. A palanquin. 2 poles, one on either side, someone in the front and someone in the back. So it took 4 palanquin carriers. And one of the palanquin carriers was missing. So they drafted Jad Bharat because he looked strong and, able of lifting the king and carrying him nicely. The problem, he readily agreed, Jad Bharat agreed, But as he was moving along the path, he saw some ants. You know the story now. So he didn't want to step on the ants. So as he was avoiding stepping on the ants, poor King Rahugana was being jostled around in the palanquin. So he leaned over the side of the palanquin and chewed out, Jad Bharat, hey, what are you doing? Don't you know who I am? I'm the king. You should be very careful. Make sure you carry the palanquin very nicely. He said he said it in an insulting way, called them bad names. So they continued along, and it happened again, because there were ants along the path. So the king started speaking even more harshly. And that prompted Jad Bharat to speak transcendental knowledge to the king. And he spoke with such high philosophy that the king had to get out his binoculars. Look at this high philosophy. So the king said, who are you? And you're not just a palanquin carrier. You're a highly elevated, perfected soul. And where did you learn this? And so he asked more and more questions. Jad Bharat continued to enlighten the king, and in course of time, the king gave up his arrogance and foolish way of life and became an elevated person himself just by hearing from Jad Bharat. So the idea of making this reference from the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's in Canto 5 of Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's a historical event that occurred. How persons who are sages or sage-like can help people who are worldly, attached, and in a material conception of life to become freed from that sense gratification way of life and think about the higher purposes of life. It doesn't mean that at the end he stopped being a king. It just stopped being arrogant and foolish and live his life properly without the aim of sense gratification, with the aim of self-realization. So that's 2 verses in this group, 6 and 7. Here's 8. Similar theme, not exactly the same, but material existence is being identified as a passing phantasmagoria, just like things that are produced from the rains at rainy season. It's very nice, but it's phantasmagoria. Phantasmagoria means now you see it, now you don't. A fantasy, something that's not real and substantial. Prabhupada writes, the colorful greenery of the newly grown grass, the seasonal flowers, the frogs' umbrellas. What's a frog's umbrella, do you know? Mushrooms. You know that one? You know what a mushroom is? Yeah? Yeah? So sometimes frogs go underneath the mushroom. Serves like an umbrella, so you don't get wet. Okay. The butterflies and other variegatedness of the rainy season perfectly represent a well-to-do family absorbed in vanity over their personal assets. So this is one of the ladies' paintings for the original book. Showing butterflies and seasonal flowers and things. There's many such paintings. I drew some of them from the internet. Depictions of the bounty of the rainy season. Now, supposing it's not the rainy season, and supposing somebody is in a situation of simplicity or scarcity. Previous to affluence, when a man was as dry as fallow land and had none of these opulences, he was plain in behavior. So Prabhupada is appreciating that life that's very simple. However, later, when the same man becomes rich, he displays his opulence in various colorful ways. Opulence captivates the proprietor as though he were in a dreamland of his own creation. Now, it doesn't always happen like that. It's not always that people that are simple and in a position of scarcity become opulent. But when that does happen, it's not uncommon that someone will like to display that opulence and find pleasure in having it and displaying it and living a life of luxury. It's like a dreamland. But then time passes, and so does that situation of opulence pass, just like the changing of the seasons. The charm of opulent life induces one to forget the principle that everything in the world comes and goes away like the regular changing of the four seasons. There's a painting specifically meant to show that. The four seasons. Of course, in India, there's not 4, 6 seasons. But the idea is affluence comes and goes, just like flowers. There's the seasonal flowers, and then after the seasonal flower season is over, they're withered flowers. And time keeps moving things. So pursuing material pleasure in times of affluence is not the position of a wise person, any more than the advancement of material civilization is compared to the mirage in a desert. You've seen a mirage before? How about your sister? You've seen a mirage before? Mirage means you see water where there's no water. It's a reflection of the sun. Sometimes this reflection of the sun on sand. We're going to see some images. Here's one. There's, they're in a desert riding on the back of a camel, and it looks like water, but it's not water. It's the sun reflecting on silicon, and the silicon reflection looks like water, but it's not water, because in desert, it's a place where there's no water. But if it looks like water in a desert, it's just a reflection or a mirage. So mirage-like pleasures. Here's another photograph. Here's a scene where there's the sun reflecting on the sand, and it's just a mirage. Now, there is such a thing as water. Water is not false, but we must not seek water in a desert, because the desert's a place where there's no water. However, using that metaphor of a mirage, in this world, it looks like such and such, something or other, is happiness. So it looks like happiness, and people pursue that happiness like pursuing water in a desert where it doesn't exist. A living entity, by his past experience, remembers the real happiness of his original spiritual existence. But since he has forgotten himself, he seeks spiritual or permanent happiness in matter. although this is impossible. Just see the mastery of language that Prabhupada is taking a very simple scene in nature and allowing the reader to be directed towards looking for permanent happiness rather than something temporary. And his point is that permanent happiness of knowing ourselves and our relationship with the Supreme is within us, but forgotten. And the nature of pursuing material happiness is it makes that forgetfulness stronger and stronger, or knowing who we really are goes further and further away. So that's 3 verses. There's 2 more to go. This particular verse, Prabhupada gives strong emphasis to agrarian lifestyle. Certainly, agrarian lifestyle benefits from the rainy season. And he speaks of it as God's gifted profession. A picturesque scene of green paddy fields enlivens the heart of the poor agriculturalist, but it brings gloom to the face of the capitalist who lives by exploiting the poor farmers. We're going to see this painting a few more times, because the rainy season represents a season of affluence, certainly for agriculture and greenery and other nice things, flowers and other nice things. And how that impacts on different people is part of his message. So he's appreciating the simplicity of agricultural occupation. With good rains, the farmer's business in agriculture flourishes. Agriculture is the noblest profession. It makes society happy, wealthy, healthy, honest, and spiritually advanced for a better life after death. Now, it's not like everyone should be an agriculturalist, but those that have that propensity in life, that's a gift and a blessing from God, a life of simplicity, a life of respecting nature, and so forth. God's gifted professions for mankind are agriculture and cow protection. Even Krishna engaged in cow protection. The value of protecting cows. And the absence of that value, what do we have? Iron factories do not produce grains. They accelerate both an artificial lifestyle and pollution. So, in the context of presenting something that comes within nature during the rainy season, Prabhupada is taking the opportunity to speak on one of his favorite subjects, which was the higher values in human society are taken away by going away from agriculture and going towards industry. Modern large-scale commerce and industry damage the farmer's life. When we were visiting Vrindavan this time, it was very noticeable the proliferation of tractors. Now, there was a time when there weren't tractors, and what tractors do today was being done by bullock carts. The plowing of the fields and carrying of loads and things like that. But when you don't have the bullocks doing those things, you have tractors doing those things. It makes a lot of noise, a lot of air pollution. And then what happens to the bulls? They become costly. And so when something is costly, what do? You get rid of it. Common, at least. So it's becoming more commonplace, even amongst agriculturalists. Trade is meant only for transporting surplus produce to places where the produce is scanty. Ideal scene, simple life, God-centered life. When food grains are produced abundantly, the farmers become financially stronger. Thus, the capitalist becomes morose at being unable to exploit them. Here's that fellow again. So just one more verse. There you see out the window, there the agriculturalist, and he's conspiring with his ministers how to exploit the workers. But when they have abundance, there's no need for them to give up their abundance. For what? They're very content and very happy. Last, transcendental refreshment through service of God. So again, we're going back to the rainy season. Just as a living being attains a transcendently attractive form by rendering service to Lord Hari, similarly, all the inhabitants in the land, of the land and the water, assume beautiful forms by taking advantage of the newly fallen water. So water is life-giving, and when it's there abundantly, then life flourishes. Life in the land, life in the water. By regularly drinking and taking bath in the fresh rain water of the rainy season, the tired and parched animals are refreshed, and their complexions become brilliant as their health is invigorated by the arrival of new rainwater. So the thought is going to how the animals and the birds and all living entities are getting benefit from the rainfall of the rainy season. It's life-giving. Similarly, this is the last slide for this evening. Devotees who take advantage of the beautiful and invigorating downpour of the transcendental descriptions of Krishna find their spiritual consciousness invigorated and refreshed. Devotees look exactly as if they have come directly from Vaikuntha. You see in the photograph in the upper left, it's the Boston Common. It's a very old photograph, 1970, where the Back to Godhead magazine arranged for the devotees in the temple to all go together to a place where we would have daily kirtan. The members of the ISKCON press and everybody went out together. This is how we dressed in those days. Ladies wore yellow saris and men wore their white or saffron dhotis. And we went in the public chanting Hare Krishna. And that was invigorating. I mean, the dancing was wasn't just wasn't cosmetic, it was very joyful, very natural. So Prabhupada would say, it appears that these young people have descended from Vaikuntha. So one takes benefit. It's a step back from these first 10 verses. Prabhupada is wanting his listener to understand Bhagavan, because the Bhagavat is about Bhagavan. Bhagavat means in relation to Bhagavan. he wants his reader to understand from the pages of his book who is Bhagavan. And when one comes in contact with Bhagavan more and more and more, then they become jubilant, become like residents of Vaikuntha, and live their lifestyle accordingly. So I just appreciating once again Prabhupada's mastery at the English language, taking scenes of nature and drawing his reader, the people of Japan, and whatever that part of the world that people came from to attend this conference, to understand truly how to elevate and cultivate the human spirit, leading to the Bhagavan conception of life, or Bhagavad Dharma. Very creative. So that's it for this evening. Much shorter than our midday session. See if there's some discussion. I think it's good that it's shorter because my voice is not doing so well.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I have a quick question about what you have explained, right? So I was thinking about like abundance and when you don't have it, right? So how do I match it with my life? Like if you see my life is like, I won't say like I had some scarcity in anything. Whatever I wanted, I had it. At least, like, even if I think in a long perspective, something I will be thinking in a long run, I usually get it. Like, I was thinking about that abundance and scarcity. How do I link it with my life, Maharaj?
Is it an application question? Well, there's several things. One is we're dependent. So your description is, while dependent, whatever it is that I've wanted, somehow it has come. So I've never really had like an extreme situation of scarcity. I've always had at least sufficient, and generally more than what I really need. And that's your statement. Now, the question is how to deal with situations that are situations of scarcity when you haven't even had to deal with it. It's been sufficient. Well, there are, in Vedic culture, in any civilized culture, certainly in Vedic culture, one of the virtues of a virtuous person is charity. And charity means I have something. Let me share that something with those that may not have that something. And it's just a principle to live by. I was listening to a seminar given by Hari Parshad Prabhu, and he I didn't hear it, but he gave a whole seminar on, there's a book written by Bhattri Hari, I think was the author, a whole like long book describing that the primary virtue of this age of Kali is charity. Now, in the Bhagavad Dharma, the primary virtue of a human being is Nama Sankirtan. And following right behind that is charity, because when you perform Nama Sankirtan, or the Yuga Dharma, the primary means of awakening our dormant God consciousness, then in general, naturally, necessities are supplied. Or from spiritual well-being, material well-being follows, so which is another way of what you're saying. That sufficient material well-being has as a natural result of your past good deeds. You have what you need because of past good deeds. But there may be people that haven't performed past good deeds, and they're insufficient. So now, charity is a natural thing. Now, how can charity be directed? That's another tricky. Just opening or giving to charities that do philanthropy and hospitals and feed people and stuff like that. That doesn't lead to permanent well-being. How can those kinds of things lead to permanent well-being? When permanent well-being comes when the soul is nourished. Anyway, so how to utilize your position or anyone's position that has sufficient of necessities of life is to be charitable. And then there's degrees of being charitable, or more spiritually directed ways of being charitable. In Vedic culture, giving charity to the cows and the brahmanas is a universal one, because the brahmanas know how to use that charity. They don't just use it for their maintenance. They use it for service to the Supreme. So charity to brahmanas or charity to Vaishnavas leads to, it's like watering the root of the tree so that all the parts of the tree benefit by watering the roots of the tree. So it takes some intelligence to understand how to utilize, and then when there's sufficient, or what to speak of abundance. And that's the whole of Vedic culture. Kings will have the capacity to take taxes, or wealthy people who, by whatever the means, have become wealthy, they're to distribute that wealth that was in previous section, the midday section. The distribution of the assets of life in a charitable manner. The downpour of mercy, like the comparison of the rain. It doesn't discriminate. Here they need some rain, so it won't rain over there because it's rocks and mountains. I don't rain over there. The rain goes everywhere. So, with some discrimination, give in charity. Give wise charity. And as the way that nature moves, this is another point, sometimes there's more abundance, sometimes there's less, sometimes there may be even scarcity, sometimes there's misfortune. Now, how do you navigate your way through all of that? The principle is keep your attention focused on the purpose of life, the mission of life, the awakening of our God consciousness, and stay focused on that. And then, based upon the circumstance, then you have some latitude or boundaries within which you direct that dedication to the Supreme style of life, and that's Bhagavata Dharma. So if in your case, or anyone's case, there is not a position, an experience of scarcity, that's just fine. Krishna's mercy. And if there's scarcity, that's just fine. It's Krishna's mercy. And it gives one an opportunity to be more dependent. Prabhupada described a situation on a couple of occasions in 1942. He was very specific. The leader of Great Britain in 1942 was, what was his name? Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill wanted men of India to join the British Army. So he made a strategy. They bought up all the rice, so there was a rice scarcity, and the price of rice shot up. It was like a famine. There was sufficient rain, but they just bought up all the rice, so there's hardly any rice. And then the government said, if you want payment to take care of your family, join the army, because people were dying from scarcity of rice, or the price of rice people couldn't afford. Prabhupada gave the numbers. Previously, so many anna for some kilo of rice, and now it's like 10 times. And poor people didn't have the means. So it was an inducement for them to join the army. It was artificial, very diabolical. But people joined the army. They got filled up the ranks of the army, and so they had a big part of the battle, the British battle in World War II. So sometimes there can be scarcity. It happens. Supposing there's no rain. I remember in Andhra, during Prabhupada's time, for several years there was no rain. And it was like a big problem. It was scarcity. So they asked Prabhupada what to do. He said, let's have big kirtan. So the devotees went through the streets of Hyderabad, and rain came. And it was all over the newspapers. The rain brought rain. So you make sacrifice, and necessities are there. So if you live your life in a theistic way, and even more in a transcendental way, then scarcity is less likely to happen. But if it does happen, Prabhupada said, when he was a householder at that time, he was very concerned. Maybe the devotees in the temple are starving, or they're not able to serve the deities nicely because they don't have grains. So he went to the temple and asked them, do you need help? They showed him the storerooms. We have so much donation. We're using it to feed people that don't have it. So we're fine. Krishna is taking care of us. So we serve Krishna, and Krishna will take care of us, is the point. And if you don't experience scarcity, that's your good fortune. And if you experience scarcity, it's your good fortune. It leads to taking deeper shelter of personality of Godhead. And in between, continue to be charitable, but be charitable in a way that's wise. Not just Dridra Narayan Seva, but wise. That Krishna should be pleased, and what's pleasing to Krishna. Anything else?
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. I have comment. It's a wonderful presentation. It's very, very, very beautiful. All glories to Srila Prabhupada that he gave us. So I'm feeling very fortunate that I can see this presentation, and I can relate when he made, when he was preparing this. About the people who could not take the advantage of this in 1961. So when I compare to them, I feel really fortunate that today I can see it through you. So thank you, Guru Maharaj. And I was also able to relate when you was telling about the rain. So it's still happening in my village, where the place I belong in India. So they do Ashtajam and Sankirtan when there is no rain, because that part is also dependent on agriculture.
That's a comment, not a question.
Yes, yeah, it's a comment, Guru Maharaj. Thank you.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Uh, I'm just curious about this last picture. May I know which year this picture was taken?
1970, summer 1970.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. So in this Bhagavatam verse that we saw today, 10:14:3, there was a part where it said that dedicating their lives to the narrations, I'm just paraphrasing Guru Maharaj, narrations of Supreme Lord. So I just wanted to hear a little more, Maharaj, if you so desire, that what does this dedicating our lives means to the narrations?
It's central. Dedicating one's life, let's say, a major part of your life is your family, your children, your husband, your household duties, your work, your housekeeping. That's a major part of your life is your family duties. Now, dedication of one's life means hearing topics related to Krishna at the center of each of those things, or at the center of your life. Thus, Krishna consciousness then spreads and permeates all the other parts of what your duties of life are. It's likened, the example, pouring water on the root of the tree, and then all the parts of the trees, branches and twigs and leaves and flowers and fruits and everything get water. Same. The duty of your family responsibilities gets real nourishment when there's dedication to the activities of hearing the topics of Krishna, hearing the holy name, and reading Srimad Bhagavatam, and hearing, etc., etc. It gives spiritual nourishment to those duties of your life. That's at the center. It's not just an add-on, but it's at the center.
Yes. So I just have one more curiosity question, Maharaj. Like as you mentioned, this example of how the tractors are replacing the bullock cars. So this is like it's like spreading in all the areas. It looks like all the spheres of life. Like I see in children's schools and seeing the children and just relating to the old times many years ago. So now they are emphasizing so much on the technology that everything is, they are not even writing so much. They are not like memorizing so much. So like it feels that they are losing those capacities as well many times, like when we do drama performances, so children are preferring to get less lines, although we were fighting to have bigger parts and more lines, but now kids are inclined to have less responsibility and less memorizations and all. So this is really very, very worrisome, Maharaj, that I mean slowly these refined qualities are getting lost. So is it like force of time, because no one person can be blamed for this? Should we understand it this way, or?
Well, that's one way to look at it, the force of time. There's other ways to look at it. It's another saying the same thing in other ways. It's the advancement of the age of Kali. Right within the Bhagavatam, it's described, and what you're narrating is just a little, a little slice of the pie. And the pie shows good qualities are being diminished. Duration of life is being diminished. Compassion is being diminished. Everything is being diminished by the influence of, you could say, time or the age of Kali.
Nama Sankirtan is the ultimate solution.
It's the point of the needle, and it's the shaft of the needle, and it's the head of the needle. But then the needle has its structure as well. In other words, along with the Sankirtan, there's activities dedicated to, just like, taking this drama, continue doing it, even, the tendencies are shrinking and so forth and so on. It's very natural art and a manner of expression and lessons learned and a way of gauging human energy, human spirit, in a way that's conveying in a meaningful and communicative way the message of bhakti. I remember there's a recording of Srila Prabhupada explaining to Hayagriva, who was an English professor at Ohio University, a drama that Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote, a several-part drama on the advent of the age of Kali. And it's details and details and details. And that those very details were then enacted by the Vaikuntha players, a group of devotees that had acting propensities, and they practiced and practiced and practiced and became really proficient at it. So the first scene is Kali and his consort Sin. So remember, watching the drama, there was Rasagya Dasi was Sin, decorated this way, that way. So we had it as a skit on Street Sankirtan. They would have their costumes, and when the kirtan stopped, they'd come out and perform a skit right on the street. So it's a medium, that's just one example, but it's a medium where human skill and virtue and so forth can be displayed, as opposed to YouTube and other ways that people are now accustomed, and losing track of a more refined and subtle human display of similar lessons.
Thank you so much.
You have something online? No? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.